Mark, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. I'm really delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Brendan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Look, you know our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So I open the show with this question to all of our guests. What does scaling with purpose mean to you, Mark?
Oh, man. It's ironic. We're literally going through this transformation of my business right now, SealFit, so that we can scale with purpose. And I think that's the point, is like, what is the heartbeat of the organization? What's the center mass of why you do what you do, and how can everyone really align around that? So they're thinking about not going to work, but about how do they fulfill their purpose through the business or through the organization to help it grow and to serve more people. In order to do that, the organization has to be radically focused on the well-being of all the stakeholders, especially starting with the staff/employees. And so that's one thing we're working on, is how do we become radically focused on the well-being so the employees aren't coming to work and having a toxic or a negative relationship, or even an oppositional relationship, where they'd rather be somewhere else. But we want them to want to be there because they're growing, they're thriving, they're connecting deeply. It's a safe environment. And part of that thriving is that they get to serve people in a profound way, so that they're getting this incredibly rewarding feedback system through that service, right? Yeah. And then that feeds into the broader purpose of the business in terms of, doing something that's unique in the world. Just like every individual is unique, I mean, every company can have a unique impact, a unique positive impact. And so understanding what that is, and then staying very true to that, staying very close to that, not wandering off the reservation.
Here. I love that. And just on that, to explore that a little bit further, do you believe then organizations can only scale successfully if you discern the golden thread between the personal purpose of your team members and the organizational purpose?
I think so, right. I mean, I think that's why engagement is, hovering around 30 to 35% for most companies. Is like, the employees aren't aligned. Their purpose is not aligned with the company's purpose, or the company doesn't really have a clear purpose besides returning money to shareholders, on a quarterly basis. And so you get low engagement, and you get a high turnover, and you get toxic bosses and all that, because it's very transactional leadership. And it's also built upon that old idea of kind of management science, where where a human being is a resource to be extracted for performance and for efficiency. And so those models are so broken. They're not broken, they just kind of petered out in the early 2000s after the internet kind of blew things wide open. And so you're seeing it now with younger millennials and Gen Z. They're just saying no to that. I don't want to be part of that. And so they're starting their own organizations, like many of your listeners, who are, combining personal purpose and passion with organizational purpose and passion, and staking that kind of claim in a big purpose, big mission purpose for the organization that is attracting other like-minded individuals. Now, all these individuals are going to be unique, and they're going to have different variations on their own individual purposes, but there's an overlap, right? It's like that Japanese concept of ikigai for an organization. There's an overlap of all the individuals. And so they're all finding some sort of where all the individuals kind of enter in different aspects of interest and passion, but at the center of that, all of their purposes intersect with the organizational purpose. Yeah. When you can find that, then you get organizational flow, which is just extraordinary. And that the organization becomes a growth culture where everyone is going and growing together. When I mean growing, I don't mean growing in skills. I mean growing in awareness, growing in inclusiveness, growing in compassion, growing up, basically, like using Wilbur's terminology. They're growing up. Yeah. The organization becomes their spiritual practice, so to speak, or their emotional development practice, all of the above.
I've just returned from Japan, actually. What an incredible country, 127 million people who are deeply bought into a traditional culture, but they fuse the traditional and the contemporary so powerfully, and this culture is aligned to to develop and grow its people, but deeply respectful of one another. They're servant oriented. So yeah, and the concept of ikigai is so powerful and so central to how that country actually serves its people and serves those who visit. So very, very powerful. But
Sure.
you mentioned passion and purpose earlier. I discovered through reading your wonderful book, Unbeatable Mind, and following you for quite some time, that you and I have something, well, a number of things in common. We both worked for Coopers and Lybrand.
No way.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Right on.
yeah, so there you go. We both worked for
You're
Coopers and Lybrand.
a recovering accountant as well.
Exactly that. Yes,
Oh,
yes. As
wow.
as somebody says, yeah, I used to be an accountant, but I'm all better now. So, yeah. So I worked in Coopers and Lybrand. Our directions of travel went slightly differently. I used it as a passport into business and have emerged out of that and have now become a passionate practitioner and instructor on breathing practices, which is woven through all of our programs and all of my coaching. And I know you're incredibly passionate about breathing and the use of breathing practices to enhance our performance. But after I left Coopers, I went into business. You went into the Navy SEALs. So can you share with our listeners how you moved from double entry to the Navy SEALs, Mark?
Double entry bookkeeping to single entry mortal wound to the enemy.
There we go.
Oh my God. Well, gosh, I tell this story in the book you're reading, Unbeatable Mind, or that you read, and also a little bit different version in The Way of the Seal. It was my introduction to Zen meditation and the practice of Zen. So the short version of the story is when I went to New York City, I had come from a small town in upstate New York, and from a rather kind of a tumultuous family, which wasn't not uncommon, but it certainly was part of my conditioning, where there was a lot of rage and alcoholism on my father's side and codependence on my mom's side, and all that kind of stuff that goes with that. And so I found solace in two things: nature. It's very, the town I grew up in was like literally 400 people, and we were surrounded with beautiful countryside, and then spent our summers up in the Adirondack Mountains, which is 6 million acres of forest land protected by in a national park system by Roosevelt, and 5,000 freshwater lakes. And we had a home on one of these lakes, and there was no road access, so we took a boat, and my backyard was a mountain range and the front yard was a lake. And so I was always under the water and in the mountains, basically trying to get the hell away from the house, stay outside. And so that also led me to being a fairly good endurance athlete. I found myself just running the trails, and I love to do it alone. And I found myself, drawn towards swimming because I was effective swimming, and I was all into water sports like water skiing and whatnot. So I got recruited to swim competitively at Colgate University, which is also in upstate New York, only 45 minutes from where I grew up. Really nice liberal arts school, considered lower Ivy League. Very difficult to get into these days. I probably wouldn't even make it in these days, Anyway, so I swam competitively. I ran triathlons. I ended up rowing. I had, an average kind of, in all other respects, academically, I was a pretty average student. But I loved training, right? So it was part of my character that was deeply woven into me, that I loved training. And as you know, those sports, endurance training like running and rowing and even swimming, all have aspects of mental training in them without really, the coaches even knowing what's going on. Back in my day, right? This is in the 80s. There was breath control work, especially swimming, right? There was concentration training, right? Being able to concentrate on just your task in front of you. There was mindfulness, because, if you're just going back and forth in a pool for 2 hours straight, you can either drive yourself crazy, or you can develop a capacity to just witness what's going on and get into those flow states. And I developed all that stuff quite naturally and spontaneously. And also I had this is kind of an interesting part of the story. I had a pretty progressive swim coach at Colgate University who was really exploring visualization. And he had me learn how to visualize my entire my primary race, which was a 200-meter breaststroke, with my eyes closed and a stopwatch. And it took months, but I finally got to where I could do the whole race in my mind. And that had a profound effect on my mental development, right? Because that's pure concentration training. So here I go back to I said this was a short story, but it's turning out to be a little longer. But so I get this job by the grace of God with Coopers and Lybrand. I wasn't really qualified academically, but they saw something in me or this Mark character that I didn't see in myself. But so they gave me this opportunity, and I had to get into NYU, and I got into NYU on academic probation because there was a work study program with NYU and Coopers, and there were other big 8 firms at the time involved. There were about 70 of us in this cohort. So we were all going to go to NYU Stern School of Business to get our master's in accounting. None of us had accounting degrees. We were all recruited as liberal arts graduates. The idea was that if we stuck it out, we'd make more well-rounded partners someday. And guess what? My best friend, who was in that program with me, recruited by Ernst and Winnie, or Arthur Young.
Ernst Young.
Now he's Ernst and Young. He's the global chief executive officer of Ernst and Young. His name is Carmine DeCibio.
Oh, wow.
My best friend, my fraternity brother. We went through the same program, and he proved the model. He's like one of 2 people who stuck it out that long out of the 70 of us. So anyways, so there I am in Manhattan, suddenly putting on a suit and tie every day, working for Coopers and going to NYU at night, and just jamming, right? And thinking, wow, this is a great opportunity. I had very little interest in accounting, but I knew that this would be a great deal because with it 4 years of hard work and focus, I could get an MBA in finance because I was going to transfer into that program. Most of us were and did. I become a certified public accountant. I have great work experience at a number of different clients, and they were all financial services clients. And then I could go over and become a trader or an investment banker and make a ton of money, and then maybe go back to the family business in upstate New York someday. That was the whole pattern, the story I was living. Well, now I'm getting back to your question. The parallel story was that I was also an athlete, and I was an athlete who was a lifetime athlete. I already had that idea when I was really young. I was like, I'm not going to look like those pasty, puffy people over there, right? I'm going to keep this going, right? And so I would get up in the morning, go for a 6-mile run. I would do my stretching and some visualization after that. And then I would go to the gym at lunchtime and bang out what we now know as a high intensity interval training workout. And no one had that terminology back in the 80s. But I would go and I would literally like a wolf sequester like 3 or 4 pieces of equipment around some central machine. Yeah. And I would just race around this stuff as fast as I could for 25 minutes, break this massive sweat, and then shower up, and I'd go back and I'd be sweating for like 2 hours afterwards, and just an incredibly training. But all my peers would go out and have their high carb lunch, and a beer, and then they go back. And so here's the real powerful shift or moment. So I had 2 hours between when Coopers would let me off of work and I had to be down at NYU for night classes, which started at 7:30, and it was down at the World Trade Center, the old World Trade Center. And of course, that time was for you to get home, change, prepare for school, eat some dinner. And so I looked at that as another training block. I said, what can I do in this period? I don't want to go back to the gym. I don't want to take another run. I don't have time to go rowing or swimming. What can I do? And I remember for a few weeks pondering this. And one night I was walking home from the subway on 23rd Street, and I came across this first, I heard the shouts coming from the second floor of this building, and I stopped and I looked up, and it was the World Sado Karate headquarters. And I went up there, and I was just blown away by what I saw. I had no exposure to martial arts, and there was this Japanese guy. You spoke about coming back from Japan recently. This guy represented the Budo spirit, right? The Budo way. Or the Bushido way, either way. He was about 5'6", and just had this kind of raw power, this clarity, this spontaneity, this intensity, at the same time, this abject humility and playfulness about him. And I was like, whoa, there's something really different about this human being that I've never seen before in another human being. And then I saw his most senior students had qualities that sort of kind of had similar qualities, but in their own unique way. And I came and I stepped in the middle of the weekly black belt class, and there were, probably about 60 or 70 black belts on the floor, all the way up to 6th degree Shihans. This guy was a legend in Japan and had been sent to the United States to start a whole style of karate called Kokushai in the United States. His master teacher at the time was a guy named Masayama. This is before, actually 10 years before I got there. And Masayama was famous for cutting the horn off of a charging bull with his hand, which is what I now know as a siddhi, like a special skill that you can accrue. You know, if you really train hard as a human being, you can do extraordinary things with your body mind, right? And so these martial artists learned how to do that with their body. And I saw Nakamura in Madison Square Garden break 6 blocks of ice. Each block was 6 to 8 inches thick, standing on top of each other with a little tiny wooden slab between them. And he broke it with his head. He just goes, boom, and forehead hits this ice. It all just shatters, and he just stands up and walks away. You know, Brendan, if you and I had done that, we would have shattered our skull and we'd be dead, right? So I started training there, thinking, okay, this is a great exercise. This is great exercise, and I'm going to learn how to, develop some skills and some fighting skills. And that was it. But then about 2 months in, I was curious what happened. At the end of this, I stayed to watch another black belt class on Thursday night. And at the end of the class, I saw some students turn off some lights and light a candle in a corner. And this is a huge, like 2,000 square foot, beautiful dojo. In the corner had a little cutout, small little alcove. And they were bringing these little wooden benches and lining them up. And so I asked another black, I said, what are they doing? And he said, oh, that's the Zen class. I said, what's Zen? He said, well, you know, you're going to have to research it. It says a meditation practice from the Japanese tradition. And I said, wow. So I went to the library the next day and I found a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by a guy named Suzuki. And I devoured it, but I didn't really quite grasp it all. It sounded so esoteric to me. But I wanted what it had, because it was talking about the powers of the mind and things that I had little tiny brief experiences with, and flow. You know, he didn't use the term flow state, but the experiences that accrue when one trains their mind in a certain way. And so I got very intrigued, right? Because there was part of me already that, you know, the part of me that said, I'm going to be a lifelong athlete. This body has the capability to be strong. Like, where did that come from? Yeah. Not many, you know, my peers certainly didn't have that thought, but I did. And so when I connected to Zen and the martial arts, I'm like, oh, well, this seems really familiar. And I agree with this philosophy, right? We can train the body and the mind to do extraordinary things, like those special powers that the yogis called siddhis. And also, that's not the point. The point is you can also train to accrue some qualities that tend to be evolutionary in nature. Meaning greater capacity to love, greater capacity to have clarity of thinking and spontaneous knowingness, and, you know, what the Japanese call shibumi, or effortless perfection. So I recognized at the time it was kind of my ego that was desiring those things, but, you know, that's not a bad way to become a seeker necessarily, right? And so I started practicing Zen meditation with them. I was the only white belt. They're only about, you know, this is very, you know, out there for the 80s. Yeah. But, you know, it was built upon those who were out there in the 60s doing meditation and psychedelics, right? But so this is kind of like the long tail of people still in New York who are now martial artists and meditating. They probably left the psychedelics behind, and they found new meaning through Zen and Buddhism. And so I started studying with these black belts. And Nakamura, every Thursday night, we had an hour-long class, and we sit on that little bench for 45 minutes, and then he would give a little chalkboard talk afterwards, and those were just priceless. And twice a year, we would go up to the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York, for 4 days of hardcore karate, balanced with, you know, long meditation sits with the monks. And this has been a long way, Brendan, of saying that quite, you know, without any real intention on my part, I suddenly stumbled into, right? You know, when they say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Yeah. Like, I stumbled into my first real teacher, mentor, guide, who happened to be a Zen master masquerading as a martial arts instructor. And the changes that my brain and body, mind, and my whole being underwent in the 4 years that I trained with him and became a black belt and studied Zen were just massive. Everything changed. My entire original identity broke down. And that led to an existential crisis. So I recognized that I completely followed a path that was ordained for me by others and conditioned for me by others in society, and that wasn't, that the same being in me that said I could be a lifelong athlete was the being in me that said that wasn't me. When I sat on that bench and I began to have experiences of just great clarity and insight. And what came up through that whole period was that, first off, that everything that I was doing was not right for me. I was going down the wrong path, and I was like on a train that was picking up speed. And that led to the crisis. And that crisis, I literally quit my job. I quit the karate. I came out to California thinking, I got to find myself. I got to figure this out. And I'm going to meditate, literally. Like I thought I could just force myself to meditate until I had the answer. And of course, that didn't work. Right. And so after 3 months and I'd run out of money as this kind of nomad, I came back to New York, got a job back, but Cooper's didn't take me back because I kind of stung them. And so I got hired by Arthur Andersen, which was actually a really good firm at the time. Yeah. And went back to karate after a 3-month break and went back to NYU. And I said, okay, I'm going to finish what I started. But by the time I finish, I'm going to have great clarity. So I just let go of the pressure to have the immediate answer. And I just started asking better questions. And I took up journaling and reflected practice. And then it started to come to me really quickly. And what kept coming to me was that I'm meant to be a warrior. Now, back to like our conversation earlier about Ikigai, like I didn't get sensations and imagery on the meditation bench that I was meant to be a Navy SEAL. Like there was nothing about that was about anything practical or related to the physical world. It was all this archetypal energy, sensations, feelings, and just like it felt like the arc of my soul was speaking to me that I either was a warrior, I'm meant to be a warrior. And so then I started to ask questions like, okay, well, if that's true, then how? Like the how is the doing and the practical in the world part, but the who is really a spiritual thing, right? It's from your very center of your being. And so the who started to be clear. The who was to be a warrior. Now the how was not clear. And yet when I started to accept the who, is when the how started to gain, to show itself to me. And that's when I learned about the Navy SEALs. So I literally, same kind of story. I was walking home one night from work this time and just taking a long walk. It was about 20 blocks down to my house or my apartment. And I passed a Navy recruiting center or office, just small office, in street, facing the street. And there was a poster. The poster had the words, "Be someone special" across the top of it. And it had like guys doing Navy SEAL shit. They were Navy SEALs. The poster didn't say anything about the Navy SEAls. Like today, it'd be like U.S. Navy SEAls. Yeah. Back then, they were a super secret organization of about 600 or 700 people. And they were just using it as kind of like recruiting sizzle on the steak. You know what I mean? To draw people into the office. And then they would say, you can't do that, but here, sign here. We'll send you to the fleet and whatever. Yeah. Which they tried to do with me, by the way. And I was like, no. Those guys in that poster out there, that's the only thing I'm interested in.
But I would imagine that, that would have appealed to kind of 99% of the intake would be the highly charged, testosterone fueled alpha men who haven't been through years of Zen Buddhism and meditation. Clearly at 26, you graduated as honor man, #1 ranked trainee, out of a class of 170. Given that that the way you entered into the SEALs was exceptional in terms of your mindset, and I'm making an assumption here that the rest of the class are highly testosterone charged alpha type males, but what did you learn going through that process about the power of your own mind, Mark?
Right. Well, that was the first time that I had got to apply in a real performance environment, with the exception of my black belt test. But that was very solo. Like I was there in a fight for survival for my black belt test. And what Nakamura was looking for was not only did I know all the, the practical skills that I had learned over the last 4 years, but that I could drop into some sort of separate or distinct place of mind where the doer of the act of the fight was separate from the ego identity of Mark Divine. And that's when you get that flow, that spontaneousness, right? That doing without any doer being present. And you see that kind of idea in martial arts movies where the master is just operating at a speed and spontaneity, which is impossible, right, for the mind to do. And so I found that, but for me, I had to get to it just through this exhausting series of fuck ups and failures on the floor, and fighting every single black belt in the tri-state area for hours. It was brutal. And so I did have the experience there that these skills were valuable, but in that environment, it was like, yeah, valuable in a fight, right? So then I go to SEAL training, and I'm with a team. They organize us with a team of 6 others. We call the boat crew because we had these little boats that are smaller than Zodiacs that were called IBS. And the IBS was an acronym for inflatable boat small. We called them itty bitty ships. And this is like classic. You see imagery of Navy SEAL training. The SEALs are always hauling these things around in their head, which we did, and they're not light, right? In fact, they've made them a lot lighter since the time I was there. We used to have guys literally break their neck because these things are just banging up and down, pounding their head, and you're running miles with these things on your head. It's not that safe, actually. So anyways, my small boat crew gave me, so I had a really strong purpose and clarity that I was going to make it through this training. And that's part of my story that I tell in the way of the SEALs. Like, my visualization came into play. So I would every day since I decided I wanted to be a SEAL, well before I got accepted and well before I went, this took about 1.5 years, I started visualizing myself going through Navy SEAL training. And I used a video that they had also called Be Someone Special, as recruiting video. That's the only imagery I had. This is well before any TV shows or anything about the SEALs. No one knew about them. So I visualized myself going through training, crushing it, even down to the day I graduated, and what I felt like. And I had this incredible sense of certainty come over me after about 9 months of that practice. I wish I could say it was quicker, because people want things like immediate these days, but visualization is really powerful if you stick with it and you put the energy into it. You're literally creating a memory of the desired future and adding energy to that memory, right? And whatever you put your energy and mental energy on, it grows. It becomes more real to you. This is why it's really powerful and important for all your listeners to realize that whatever you're focusing on, whatever you're visualizing, or if you're catastrophizing the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, you're actually making it stronger. You're making them stronger. You're going to invite more of that in your life. But if you can create a strong and powerful vision, a clear vision of the future that's aligned with your purpose, and you can practice a doing aspect of that, right? I'm going to do the what. There's some structure into that in your mind, what that looks like, and you come and practice it every day, and you add all that power, energy, emotion to it. Then what you're doing is you're creating another memory.
Can you just speak to us as to what that practice looks like? Is that 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Because this is really profound, because the second principle of our 10 principle Scale X framework is purpose and vision. They go hand in glove. Your vision being the fullest expression of your purpose at the point in which you craft it. And I'm a big proponent as well of visualization, so I'm interested to hear from you, Mark, what that practically looks like for our listeners.
Absolutely. So my understanding, and through my work, starting with pre-Navy SEALs, and then what happened to me in terms of the clarity and the certainty that overcame me, where I knew that I was going to be a Navy SEAL. It wasn't an arrogance, and it wasn't coming from my ego. It was an absolute certainty coming from the depth of my very being. So I was able to bring that certainty to my boat crew, and then we began to. I started to deconstruct what I'd learned with Nakamura, because a lot of it's just kind of baked into the daily training, and you don't even know that you're doing breath control practice, and you don't even know that you're doing, concentration and mindfulness, right? These things I was able to deconstruct what I had actually learned and experienced through the combination of Zen and martial arts. And also then the visualization, which really came not from my martial arts, but from my swimming coach. And so I put them all together into a suite of tools, and I started to teach these to my small team, and we just dominated almost everything. And this is a very rare thing, but at the end of the training, so we had 185 students. I'll come back to your question, by the way. We have 185 students starting, on day one of my SEAL training. And 6 months later, we had 19 of us left. And 7 of the 19 was me and my boat crew. Pretty extraordinary. Like, what are the chances of that? So I was teaching them breath control. I called it box breathing. I was teaching them mantra, and for maintain a positive self-dialogue. I was teaching them visualization, to visualize the win and the long, visualize succeeding at BUDS, and to do that as a daily practice. I was visualizing them how to maintain attention on the smallest of tasks that we had to do and not get overwhelmed by the totality of what we needed, what we were being asked to do. I was teaching them emotional control, to create a distance between their the thoughts and emotions that were being triggered by the instructors or by the cold or by the situation, and to just separate yourself from the thoughts and emotions. And we call that witnessing. So really, really powerful skills that I was utilizing, kind of high intensity, high risk performance environment, which just had an extraordinarily positive impact. So the visualization part, to me, like the way visualization is taught is too much focused on kind of, again, the outer doing material, right? And it does have some limited benefit, but it's always temporary, and it can always easily be interrupted or sabotaged by your deeper emotional patterns, or your, even epigenetic or karmic patterns that are driving kind of like what the yogis would call the big samskaras, or patterns in your life, or ruts. So for visualization to work in a sense of becoming something or someone, or creating something in the world that you want, it has to be deeply aligned with a true sense of purpose, or your calling, or svadharma, again, to use the Indian term, that is like what someone might say that's what your soul print is, or what the reason you're on this planet for. So the only way to uncover that highest level of purpose and calling is through inquiry, deep internal inquiry, self-awareness, meditation, concentration, and then going within, surrendering to the presence and to the source energy that runs through all of us, and recognizing that is the main thing, that is us. And within that lie all of our answers. Everything that we're searching for in life is actually right in us. It's not in front of us, it's in us. It is us. We just obscure it from ourselves. So the meditative practice is the art of clearing the mind of the obfuscations to allow that true essential nature to be known to itself, really. And when it becomes known to itself, then you can say, oh, that's it. That's my purpose. That's why I'm on this planet, right? It's to grow, and it's to serve in this very unique way. That level of clarity then can be translated into an image of you in the future, right? As being the whole person that is fulfilling that purpose, as opposed to the deeply confused and trained by society and conditioned by, a family person that is misidentifying as Mark right now, that is not at all clear about the future. And so when you have the clarity of purpose, you don't need to visualize. It's gonna come spontaneously, but you can accelerate your journey to that. And I believe you can accelerate your awakening to the truth of that through visualization and through continuing practice of meditation, which begins to, which accelerates the process of clearing up those samskaras, clearing up the emotional shadow and traumas that are hiding it from you, or holding you back from that. So and that's that. So you visualize the future as a becomingness, not as something you're doing, but as you are through your supposed work in the material world, and showing up and doing your practices and training and thinking more clearly and being more mindful and being more open-hearted and compassionate. You are removing the obstacles that were placed by culture, family, the conditioned mind, and allowing that pure center of your very being to express itself. And that's what we call your purpose. And the imagery just kind of helps you stay focused on that. And it also, in a very energetic sense, it creates that mental memory, right? So again, this gets like that center, that source center. There's no experience of time. That's complete. Pure presence is the non-duality that's spoken of in the spiritual terms. In that pure center, which you tap into through peak states and flow states, what you're doing is just saying you're out of your mind, because your body experiences space and your mind experiences time. So when you get out of your mind in a positive sense, you experience that flow state, then you stop experiencing time. And so, but you also have the realization that is actual reality, and that time is just a mental construct, just like money is a mental construct. It's an idea. So what we think of as projecting into the future and having this future me is actually happening in this right now moment. So what you're doing is you're creating the conditions in your mind to live that future self right now. And also it is all happening right now. Just like if you spend all your time mentally thinking about some disaster of the past and you give that disaster more energy, well, that's happening right now. So what you're actually doing is you're being a catastrophizing disaster right now, even though you think that happened in the past. So what you're doing is shifting all the negative energy of holding on to the past into a positive vision for the future, which is actually happening in this now moment. And you are literally just accelerating the energy toward that version of yourself.
There's just so much, and there's another 10 podcasts in that. And I want to get super practical for our listeners. I mean, you've coached a lot of business leaders, Mark. Those leaders listening to this now and maybe hearing a lot of language for the first time.
Yes.
Might
I take it for granted.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
and that's and exactly. And that's where I want to come to. You've been on this journey for 30 to 40 years, and you speak so eloquently and so knowledgeably about this. I've been on the journey for a lot less, and you've touched on a lot of the things that I've read and I've been practicing, but I want to bring it back to practical steps that leaders listening to this can relate to their own desire to scale their businesses. So let's get super practical. The practice of meditating, what does that look like for those coming to this for the first time, Mark, and the connection between meditating, visualization, and finding purpose? So let's break it right down like you were in your first accounting class. You've just presented the listeners with a beautiful set of financial reports, but we want to go right back to the double entry here.
Okay, so we'll start with the second part of the question. Wherever you go, there you are. There is no separation between you as a business professional and you as having a personal life. And this is a big issue that one of the reasons we get stuck in business is we try to think that, oh, that's just business and my personal life is over here. There's no separation. Your business is an expression of who you are, right? Especially as an entrepreneur or any leader. If you're the leader, right? It's a little bit different if you're an employee. Having said that, you can almost say the same thing is absolutely true. It's just you have to contextualize it a little differently. So that means that if you have one vision and a sense of purpose for your personal life and a different one for your business, then you're in conflict with yourself. So it's very important to ensure as an entrepreneur that your personal vision for your personal purpose and vision of what that looks like is radically aligned, so that when you're at the center point, when you're in your business and you're like the furnace of that business, you're the nuclear power plant of that business, your energy is fueling up the purpose and vision of the organization. The only way to get that level of clarity is through introspection, unless you just happen to be really, really, blessed with a radically clear mind and that sense of knowingness early in life, then great. And many, not many people, some people are, not everyone. Most people go into business with their ego on their sleeve, and they're disgusted with as being an employee. They just sense they want some freedom, and those are all very natural expressions of the yearning of the spirit, right? But then you get into business and you find, oh shit, I've just trapped myself in some structure that has nothing to do with my purpose, and I'm not passionate about it. And then you drive forward and you think, well, I'll just I'll get an exit and I'll make some money, and then I can do what I love to do. And you could spend 20 or 30 years doing that and get to the end of that road and be like, holy shit, I wasted a lot of time. So it's very important that you first look at your business as an expression and a place for you to fulfill your purpose and your vision in life, your personal purpose and vision. And then the money will follow, right? And you will have great success, but you'll have great success because you're serving in authenticity. And that's truly what integrity means. Most people look at integrity from the external of aligning thoughts, words, and deeds. But if you take it deeper, integrity is aligning your exterior life with your interior sense of self, like who you really are and what you are meant to be here on this planet for. That's true integrity. So we have to have that understanding that comes from deep clarity of purpose and vision personally, and then how you're going to organize the business to be a mechanism for fulfilling that. And like I said, that clarity usually comes from silent time. If you are fortunate enough to grow up in a place and time and with a family that also appreciated silence and dialogue and introspection about these very important things, then fantastic. That's a beautiful gift. But you and I know that this world is literally designed to keep us distracted and to keep us fragmented and separated and in a constant state of fear, because that benefits the whole consumer whatever victim mindset that both government and corporations are working overtime, and media are working overtime to foist on us, and it keeps us from being truly free. And so we're obviously very, very distracted and addicted and in a constant state of hyper arousal, and all of this prevents us from accessing those periods of silence and stillness where you can understand or hear that voice of your heart that tells you what your purpose is and or shows you what your purpose and vision is. So meditation is a path to find that stillness. It's a practice. It's not for everybody, right? But it is a proven practice. Now, let me talk about meditation itself, because there's a lot of mystique about meditation and a lot of misinformation. And one of the first things I'll say is that meditation is a highly personalized practice. Like even in the old karate days, like the reason that Miyagi told his student, wax on, wax off, just do that, just paint this fence, is because he was trying to determine his character. And there were certain things that needed to be done before you started, really the deeper training, the mental training of martial art or meditation or Zen. And these are like foundational things. First of all, the body needs to be healthy, because otherwise when you sit and meditate, you're just going to be bouncing around like a pinball, right? And so first, let's take care of the body. Let's get the body healthy, because that means the brain will be healthy. And if the brain is healthy, it's going to be firing on all cylinders. It's going to have lots of blood flow. And part of that healthiness is also a physical practice of arousal control, breathing for arousal control, de-stressing, right? Greasing up the pathway to the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms you down and bleeds off all the stress from the hyperarousal in our society. So we literally start, and you can call it meditation, but what we start with is movement and exercise, sleep and nutrition, and box breathing as your daily practice. And you're just breathing for arousal control and getting control of the breathing, slowing your breath down, getting your heart rate variability into the right zone, and you're breathing in a nice 5 count in, 5 count hold, 5 count out, 5 count hold pattern, or 4, whatever works for you. And there's variations on this, but it's very basic, but it's very profound. So then the second thing, and I learned this through Zen, that needs to happen is you need to marshal the energy of your mind, which has been taught like, because it's all training. From the moment you open your eyes as a baby, you're being trained and conditioned. You're like a block of clay, and it's just been conditioned and molded and and then you don't even recognize it because you're just baked like a frog into this conditioning. Language, culture, media, family, all these behaviors become you, and then you just take it and you identify with that.
Yeah. And even
But it's
before
not,
then, of course, because there's some genetic conditioning
that's
that we
right.
carry.
There's genetics and depending on what you believe, karmic energy as well, which is that kind of soul print. So yeah, that's and so when we are in a state of readiness to be able to actually sit without agitation and for a little bit longer periods of time to do the introspective work, the next important step is to marshal all the energy that's been taught to go all over the place in a million different directions, and to latch on to any little thing, any trigger, any emotion, any thought, anything. They say that old adage that you have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 50,000 are the same as you had yesterday. That default mode network that is trained, you have to basically marshal all that energy into a single concentrated point, which brings great powers of concentration. Like I had mastered this as a SEAL, as a swimmer, as a martial artist, and to the point where it became an obstacle for me. But it's really important to then do your meditation practice then becomes concentration practice. So I do this with imagery work, right? Because visualization is a really powerful way to concentrate. I don't mean like guided imagery on some random thing where you're going all over the place, walking through some garden, concentrating on one singular thing, right? It can be like an external object, like a candle, or for me, I teach to concentrate on the box pattern and draw it in your mind as you do your box breathing. And then you're getting a 2-for-1, a stacked practice. You're getting the arousal control and the attention control. Well, it's actually a triple practice: attention control and then concentration training, as you train yourself to hold your mind on that box pattern for longer and longer periods of time. So those are the 4 steps to really good meditation and inquiry practices. Get your physical body into a healthy state so that your brains, your head, heart, and gut brains are operating really efficiently. Then de-arouse yourself, or as part of that process, de-stress yourself through box breathing for arousal control. Then start visualizing that box, or incite a mantra, or get a concentration object that's suitable for you, and just focus on that when you do your box breathing until your mind blocks out all the other thoughts, and you can bring the full concentration power onto that one thing. Okay, so then this is all preparatory work, and for my clients, it could take years. It could take a year or two of work, because they never trained this way. And so now what happens is, now we can go into the mindful awareness phase of meditation, where now we take our foot off the gas pedal of the concentration and we kind of back up and we allow content in, but we begin to view the content from greater and greater distance. First, that experience is one of metacognition, where it's the mind thinking about its own thinking or watching its own thinking. But then you have moments where you shift suddenly out of the mental state into the pure awareness, witnessing state, which is beyond mind, where the time just drops off and everything goes still. And you can still see the mark thing having its thinking going on, but it's not you. You are more than that, right? That's when you begin to have those awakening moments. And then the more you practice that, the more your attention starts to shift to where it becomes a permanent state of witnessing. I call that simultaneous mind. I've heard the term dual awareness as well. So that's something that is trained. And then from that's the aspect, like when I was at SEAL training and I was teaching my boat crew that, hey, you got an instructor screaming in front of your face. If you are right there at eye level with him in your mind and reacting to everything he says, he wins. But if you are a mile away in your mind watching this very funny instructor screaming at this body mind named Mark, and Mark is just standing there smiling at him, and he can't hurt you, and you're not reacting to it, then you win. And you can use that metaphorically for anything in life, right? Anytime life is throwing something at you and trying to smack you down, whether it's COVID or an accident or an illness or or a business disaster or the latest cash flow crisis or this, you watch it from afar and you don't let it grab you, because it's the grab, it's getting caught up in the dramas that keep you whiplashing between, between fear and happiness.
I love that. There's so much in that, and the box breathing is a practice that I coach through our program. Am I right in saying, did you coin the actual method of box breathing? You borrowed from
I'm the first. I
pranayama?
think I'm the first one who called it box breathing.
Yeah.
I think there's probably references to square breathing, but it's basically pranayama.
Yeah.
And I've been through about 1,000 hours of yoga teacher training. This is before I started calling it box, or after, but I recognized it was just as a ratio, right? And I learned, that you can create literally hundreds of different ratios for duration of the inhale and the holds, and some retentions happen just on the top or the bottom of the inhale, the exhale. And they all will have a different physiological and mental training effect. And sometimes it's through the nose and sometimes through the mouth. Like, there are so many different ways to use breath control training. And it's very important, I'm sure you teach this, to understand why you're doing what you're doing and what the physiological and mental effect is. Because, you're moving a lot of energy, right? For example, you're a teacher, but Wim Hof's method is a very intense, sympathetically arousing breathing practice, and they're moving a lot of energy in your mind, right? And so if you're doing this thing every single day and you don't have the body mind that's ready to receive that movement of that energy, then it's very, very, you could actually spring a gasket. This is also why the Kundalini yoga community, which is all intense breathing combined with movement of the spine, has dumped enormous amount of energy into certain individuals who just weren't mentally prepared for it, and they quite literally go insane. Same thing with a ratio practice. If you have long inhale with long holds and short exhale, you're stimulating your mind and moving and bringing all this energy in, and you're not counterbalancing it with that nice long exhale, which is the rest and digest parasympathetic response, massaging that vagus nerve, calming down. And you could actually grease the groove of some agitation and anxiety as opposed to calmness. So breathing is really, really important to understand why you're doing what you're doing, what effect it's going to have on the body mind.
What would you say to the listeners who are maybe a little bit cynical about the power of conscious breathing, and maybe, long-term listeners of the show will be very familiar with my own background and my coaching around the Wim Hof practice, but I encourage, and certainly the research. I interviewed Patrick McKeown, who you'll be familiar with, Oxygen Advantage, wonderful guy. What would you say to our listeners who are a little bit cynical, let's say, around box breathing, which I love as a practice? The simplicity is, it's something that you can harness within minutes before going into a meeting, and I encourage our CEOs to lead meetings with a couple of minutes of box breathing. Yeah.
What do you teach the same?
Yeah, brilliant. Awesome. And what would you say to the listeners are the benefits of doing so in terms of actually making decisions and making better decisions?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, like, when it comes to these practices, you always have to be a study of N equals 1. I mean, you have to be the experimenter. And so if you're sitting back there being the skeptic and you haven't practiced it for 30 days at a minimum, then you're just being what else are you ignoring and be skeptical about in your life that would be extraordinarily valuable for you? And by the way, consider that your whole personality as a skeptic is negative and is bringing negative energy into your team and your family, because that's all negative. If you haven't actually explored it to find the truth yourself, and you're just resting on some belief or religious dogma, like, I had Navy SEAL trainers of mine who wouldn't step foot in my yoga studio because of their Christian religion. They thought it was like the work of the devil. And I'm like, you guys are complete knuckleheads, right? Because you are just letting someone else's training dictate your belief systems, and it's actually going to do you great damage, because This is a master practice to be able to integrate the movement of the body, mind, breath, and health of the spine in a very positive environment is one of the most extraordinarily beneficial things you can do for both for health, longevity, as well as clarity of thinking and opening of the heart. All things that we need today from leaders. So be willing to experiment and prove it to yourself. But that means being honest with the practice, right? You should be practicing. When I say prove it, I mean do it with earnestness for 20 minutes a day for 30 days. And then come tell me, or Brendan, how you feel. And I can guarantee you're going to feel very, very different. And that difference is going to be very positive. You're going to feel much, much more relaxed and calm. You're going to have much more clarity. You're going to be able to make better decisions. You're going to see more. You're going to be taking more information in. And the people around you are going to be like, dude, what have you been doing? What have you been eating? Because that's the experience of all my clients now for almost 20 years, right? So be willing to experiment and prove it to yourself. And then, be willing to at least accept that Brendan or Mark, know what they're talking about, because we've worked with thousands of clients and we've had the same experience of nothing but pure benefit that can't be accrued in any other way, by the way, right? I haven't found anything that can bring you the benefits of a commitment to breath training and then layering in the visualization and the mindful awareness and the concentration. It is literally the next phase of how we train our minds as human beings, and also the only way we're ever going to keep pace with the pace of change and what's happening with artificial intelligence, right? Because our brains are trained right now to be linear and to be fascinated with content or knowledge. And in the future, content and knowledge is basically free and available at a fingertip. And what really is going to be the master human skill or talent is creativity, new conceptualization, and the ability to mobilize at a heart level the energy of a team of teams that all are thinking and acting with that kind of creativity and spontaneity. And that's something that AI or robots are never going to be able to do.
Mark, I'm just realizing we've been chatting for over an hour. The last hour has absolutely flown, and we didn't even dive into your book. I was expecting us to do a master class in Unbeatable Mind today. What I would say,
we did.
Yeah, we touched on a lot of things, and I would encourage the listeners. I'm holding up a copy for those who are watching on YouTube. You can see that. Those who are listening, Mark's book, Unbeatable Mind, one of his 5 books. I wholeheartedly encourage you to go and get this book. Mark's really made a lot of what he has spoken about, which is steeped in years of practice and leaning on Buddhism and Hinduism and yogic traditions and martial arts and SEAL training, and brought it all together and made it very contemporary and very accessible. So I would encourage you to get that. It speaks loudly to the very first principle of our Scale X framework, which is psyche. And I always say, that principle, when you develop the right psyche, it becomes a multiplier of the efficacy of all of the other principles. With a clear psyche, your vision will be much more ambitious, much more bold. Your purpose will be more pure and more clear. And so, Mark, I must acknowledge you for the work that you do and what you put out in the world selflessly. Again, I would encourage people to go onto YouTube, just search Mark Divine, and again, look up your podcast as well, which we put a link to in the show notes. In closing, Mark, I always pose this question to our guests, given the extensive experience that you've had, the wonderful, rich life that you've enjoyed and continue to enjoy, from accounting to karate dojos to the Navy SEALs, and now scaling your own business. Can you leave our listeners with 3 timeless takeaways?
Well, of course. Why not? Stop taking yourself so seriously. Right? Start there, right? We're just so serious about it, everything. And the more rigidity you hold on to that clawing for success and identity and, wanting to scale your business, the harder it becomes because you're contracting into a lower vibrational quality and you're not allowing, the true awesomeness to flow through you, right? So let go of the grit. Don't take it so seriously. You can be deadly serious about the vision, but be relaxed about the execution.
Yeah,
Right?
love that.
So that's kind of one. And then remember that Nakamura used to say in one of his chalkboard talks, one day, one lifetime, right? What you have is right in front of you today. So I know you've got all your plans and your goals and all this, but to be honest, at the end of the day, like if you were done with this life tomorrow, would those matter? I'm not saying you don't still move toward them, but you hold on to them with a light touch while you stay really present today with what's most important. And those are the relationships and being present and there for your family and your teams and just being present. Open your heart, right? One day, one lifetime, right? Because tomorrow may not come. By the way, like the Buddha said, you can find enlightenment in a single breath if you pay close enough attention. And then, you can eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So if you're worried about like, wow, Mark, you've been at this for 30 years, or Brendan, you've been at this for 15 or 20, whatever, I'm brand new to this. Where do I start? It's overwhelming. And as I say is just start with some box breathing. And by the way, that's a good place to start even to get physically healthy, because box breathing will lead you to that back into homeostatic balance, back into more clear thinking, which then is going to look like, when the urge to go eat that second bowl of ice cream comes up, you look at that and say, no, that's not who I am. And when the urge to drink that second or third, well, you're in Ireland, drink that fourth beer comes up, you say, no, that's not who I am, right? So you become a little bit more aware because you're feeling healthier, you're sleeping better, then you start to exercise because you have more energy. So that's a phenomenal place to start. You don't have to wait. You don't have to like go to the gym for 6 months before you start your psychic training, your psyche training, to use your language, your mental training.
Yeah.
Just start.
I love that. And I always encourage our clients who are struggling, whether it be to start with some physical exercise or some mindset practices like box breathing, just take the minimum viable action.
That's right.
For 60 seconds, just try
do
some
something.
box breathing. That's it.
Right. Ask yourself, if not now, when? If not, who?
Yeah.
If not you, who? Do it. Just do it.
Brilliant, Mark. I have really, really enjoyed the last hour. It has absolutely flown. What's next for you?
I'm in the middle of my PhD in global leadership and change, so I've got to get my dissertation knife and fork, kind of sharpened up, and also working on transforming my business so it can remain relevant for the next 20 years. So both of those are kind of front and center, front and focus for me.
Oh, well done, you. Well, look, I wish you all the best with both of them.
Thank you.
I've no doubt you'll fly through your PhD with honors again. If people want to get in touch, which undoubtedly they will, Mark, where best to reach you?
Well, my personal website, markdevine.com, kind of has like links to all my podcasts and books and my blog. I've got a weekly newsletter, comes out every Tuesday with my blog and my podcast notes and a book I'm reading and some other interesting things. And that subscription is at markdevine.com. If anyone's interested in our training that kind of goes into what we talked about today, I have a year-long program called Unbeatable Team. It's like my mastermind, and we get together 4 times a year and we train in all these principles. That information is found at unbeatablemind.com. And we're putting some more information out on that soon. We're opening that up to the public really soon again. And then our hardcore SEAL, Navy SEAL style crucible training is at sealfit.com. And we have an online, coaching and a lot of content around how do you get your body and mind to be as strong as the Navy SEALs, regardless of who you are. That's
Brilliant.
awesome.
I'm curious for a few of those myself. So
Yeah.
look, we'll put links in the show notes. Mark, thank you again for your wonderful energy, wisdom, and absolute selflessness in sharing your expertise. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendan. Hoo-yah.
Take care.